He was called the Godfather of organized crime in Hawaii. But despite multiple state and federal investigations, former Honolulu police officer turned businessman Larry Mehau was never charged with a single crime. In fact, he even once sued a political candidate named Rick Reed for making that public allegation against him for libel, but lost. And while he may or may not have been a figure in Hawaii's underworld, he was a powerful man with influence over politicians and a business empire that made him a local king in everything but name. Here is his story. Joseph Larry Mehau was born on December 10, 1929 in Hilo, Hawaii, on what is called the Big Island. He was a native Hawaiian, but he also had what the Irish would call the gift of the gab. He was a man who easily made friends and built a reputation on taking care of them should anything ever be needed. When he became what was arguably the most powerful man in the state in the 1970s, the base of that power was favors. And should anyone he ever gave a favor to later on refuse to return it when asked, he would use his power to destroy that person. Physically, Mehau was a large man, who was well renowned for being extremely strong with a background in martial arts. When he was younger, he attended the University of Hawaii and played football. It was during his early days that he started to begin building the relationships that brought him so much power and influence. Larry Mehau was also known to openly associate with criminals. His relationship with Hawaii's underworld started during the 1950s when he was employed by the Honolulu police force and worked in the Metro Squad. He worked there from 1953 until 1964 when he retired for medical reasons. But the work he did was appreciated by former city prosecutor Peter Carlisle, who remembered this about Mehau. The Metro Squad were a bunch of people who were police officers, including some who were very dear friends of mine, who were enforcing the law in a very, very severe manner. There were a lot of gang problems. There were a lot of people getting mugged. There was a time when killing was rampant. He stepped in a lot of ways with the rest of these police officers in this Metro Squad and started cleaning up downtown Honolulu, started cleaning up Fort Street, started cleaning up Waikiki, and in the long run, what had been an ongoing sort of gang warfare was mitigated to a large extent, and that was a very positive thing. But for every amount of praise, there was also criticism, plus accusations of wrongdoing. Maybe he was corrupt, or maybe he just understood how things worked on the islands in a way that us mainlanders can't comprehend. But he began to cultivate relationships with the criminals, and rather than enforcing the law strictly, he started to become an arbitrator in disputes between different gangs. This might have prevented the outbreak of violence, but not everyone agreed with the way he conducted himself. In October of 1958, he was suspended for 10 days without pay for associating with known criminals. In the years after he began his early retirement, Larry Mehau returned to the Big Island and started a ranch. He also co-founded the Hawaii Protective Association, and it made him a very wealthy man. While the name sounds like a racket, it was in fact a private security company that became the largest in the state, due in part to government contracts, which were due in part to Mehau's relationships with the people awarding the work. Cronyism? Yes. Blatant corruption? That's more of a gray area, as thousands of man-hours for numerous investigations were never able to find financial proof of bribery, probably because Mehau's preferred currency was favors. During the 1970s, Hawaii's organized crime scene was dominated by a group that some called the Company, while others called it the Syndicate, but it was the same people. In 1974, the government took down Wilfred Napi Palava, whom they believed to be the head of the organization. From that point, investigators considered the group to be splintered with no central leadership. But as they dug deeper, confidential witnesses began to whisper a new name as being the power in the underworld: Larry Mehau. A task force was assembled in Honolulu to investigate the numerous claims authorities were receiving. It was composed of the FBI, the DEA, and local police. The belief was that Mehau was responsible for smuggling heroin from Asia into Hawaii, where it was then distributed to the mainland. And when they looked into him, they saw that he did in fact associate with criminals, but he also associated with politicians and judges. Mehau was also tracked when he made business trips to California, and he was seen with well-known gamblers. Meanwhile, the IRS also began to look into his finances to see if they could crack a pattern of money laundering. They looked into Mehau at every angle, but all they could find was that he was influential, but there wasn't any hard evidence of any crimes linked to him. For example, they discovered through different sources that he had direct influence on what garbage collection companies could work which routes on the Big Island. In the New York area, this industry is dominated by Cosa Nostra, and the Mafia benefits financially from that control. But there was not any evidence nor any witnesses who had direct knowledge that he was being paid off. Even Honolulu Police Chief Francis Kayela, who was leading the local police side of the investigation into Larry Mehau, admitted that while they had no direct knowledge of him committing crimes, the police did sometimes use him as a mediator into trying to manage the underworld because of his extensive list of contacts. Larry Mehau could be seen shaking hands with the governor, and then an hour later, shaking hands with a gang leader. He knew everyone. It should also be noted that Mehau and the police chief's law enforcement careers overlapped, and they most likely knew each other from their work in the police department during the 1960s. The first investigation into Mehau lasted from 1973 until 1975, and it turned up nothing but hearsay. With no concrete results to show for their effort, the investigation was forced to close with the condition that it would reopen should new evidence emerge in the future. It was reopened in 1978 when investigators decided to look at Larry Mehau as being a candidate for a RICO prosecution. To succeed, they would need to prove he was a member of a criminal organization and that he had engaged in a pattern of racketeering. All they uncovered was that Mehau organized an election campaign concert for Governor George Ariyoshi that was headlined by singer Don Ho. The musicians were all told that they needed to perform for free. A few balked at this and refused to do the gig. In retaliation, they were fired from their local jobs as entertainers, and it's believed this was achieved through Mehau's influence. The message was clear: go against his wishes and you will suffer. But again, this was not technically illegal, and there was no concrete evidence to show that he directly had these people fired. This second investigation fizzled out in 1980 without any evidence of a crime. Mehau's FBI file was reopened again in 1992 because of the murder of Jonelle Auna on the Big Island. She was a 16-year-old Tahitian native who went by the nickname Nell. On October 24, 1991, she was shot in the head execution style in front of witnesses to make an impression on them as to what happens to informants. Investigators learned of a drug ring operating on the island where well-dressed businessmen used local teenage girls as their mules. Given that Larry Mehau was the most influential man on the island, and the prior allegations of him being in the drug trade, investigators looked into if he had a possible connection. The idea was to prove that he was a member of the group dealing drugs, and then to use the murder plus the drug trade as the racketeering activity to take him and the group down with RICO. This investigation into Mehau hit another dead end. There were allegations of corruption in the Hawaii County Police Department, but the FBI could not find facts to substantiate the crime. A man whose name is redacted in the FBI files was arrested for her murder, but the charges were later dismissed, and today, her murder is officially unsolved. For his part, Larry Mehau was very vocal up until his death about the allegations that he was the godfather of organized crime in Hawaii to be false. He viewed them to be slanderous and a stain on his reputation. In 1994, during an interview with KHON2, he said, "I wish it were the old days when you could pull somebody by the ears and don't get everyone else involved in a conspiracy, because that's all they need. If I were to left hook someone, what would happen? Maybe I would break your jaw, or the guy's jaw. And how long would he suffer? How long? It'll heal eventually. In a year, he won't even remember the pain. But that written word will follow me the rest of my life. I mean, that word is more powerful than anything I could do to hurt them." There is an old expression that says when there is smoke, there is fire. But the full weight of the federal government was unable to uncover a single crime against the man, which is pretty incredible. Cynics will blame the lack of results on cover-ups due to his influence at the highest levels, while others will claim that they didn't find any crimes because he was a law-abiding citizen, with the allegations being motivated by jealousy. Larry Mehau passed away in 2015, while none of the allegations against him have been substantiated. And in the United States, you are considered innocent until proven guilty. Perhaps the main lesson that can be learned from Mehau's story is that the perception others have of us is related to the people we associate ourselves with. There is one paper in his FBI file that describes a conversation between the agent and a confidential witness who was part of the criminal world. He told the agent that Mehau was a friend and that as far as he knew, the man was not involved in any illegal activities. This prompted the agent to ask, "Well, if he is not a criminal, then why is he associating with you?" The man did not have a quick answer to that.